Hey everybody, Mark Stiles down here at Studio B at 892 with one of our lead attorneys, Ben Cote. Ben, thanks for coming, buddy.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, so we took a different format today. Hope you enjoy it. You, the viewers, have asked for a simple understanding on how to do a title exam on the free online public searches for your respective county registers. So Ben got into the studio and did a webinar for you. Now, this is going to be on our YouTube channel in perpetuity, so feel free to use it as a resource as with any of the videos on our YouTube channel. Please subscribe and share with anybody. Ben, take it away.
Let's go.
Today we're going to look at the Registry of Deeds website and how to do a basic title search to get additional information about a property. Let's get started. We start at this page. This is the homepage for the Registry of Deeds website. In this particular case, it's the Plymouth County Registry of Deeds, but it's really not important which county we start with because most Registry of Deeds websites are going to be the same. The same principles can be applied whether you're in Suffolk, Barnstable, Norfolk County, Worcester, really anywhere in the state. So in Plymouth, the first button we want to press is click here to search our records. So this brings us to our search screen. So you can see that by default, we're searching by name, and that's really important to remember. There's a tendency to use the address search function because it's easy. We know what the address is. But it's really important to remember that the Registry of Deeds only indexes properties based on the names of the buyer and the seller. And so for an accurate review of the registry records, we want to make sure that we're using the name. So we can search by a few different criteria. Name search, of course, is the most accurate. Book search, this is if you already know what the deed reference is, though I would caution against using the reference that's available either on the tax card or a reference given by the client because sometimes there could be an intervening document that they don't remember or isn't reflected in the record. Date range, this is really only applicable if we know a very specific time that the instrument is recorded. As you might imagine, there are countless documents here and it can be very burdensome to go through each one. Property search. This is very tempting to use, but I'm going to show you why that might not be your best option, but it is good in a pinch. Registered land. That is the land court side of the Registry of Deeds. It's a little bit different. The indexing standards are slightly different, and I think that's a topic for another day. It's a little bit more complicated. Finally, we have plans. This is very helpful if you want to do a more advanced search. You want to know exactly which lots are being conveyed with a piece of property. You want to try and figure out where easements are. This is more of an advanced topic, and again, I would suggest that we talk about that on a different day. So we're going to start with the name search, which is the default, and I'm going to use a very generic name. I'm going to use John Smith because A, I've looked ahead and it's a good example, and B, it's something that I know that we'll have plenty of topics to look at. So I hit advanced because this allows us to do a couple different things. First off, we can talk about different document types. And so what do we mean by this? We could come down here and say we only want to look at deeds. So we could say, I only want to see a deed. In this particular case, I don't actually want to do that. I want to search all document types so that we can see exactly what's going on. The next thing is we can limit by town. Now, if you have a very unique name, you probably don't need to do this, and I would actually suggest against it because sometimes the town isn't indexed as part of the record. And like I was saying before, the only thing that we know is very, very accurate are the names. And even then, there can be typos, so just keep that in mind. The next thing that can be very helpful is the recorded date. So if we're looking for a deed transfer that's happened in the last 30 years, we probably, or 40 years, we don't really need to go back to 1796. In fact, it's pretty unhelpful to get hundreds and hundreds of results when we know that the things we're looking for really only happened in the last few years. So in this particular case, I'm just going to type in 1975. It's a nice round number. So 1/1/1975. So it's only going to show us things that happened after January 1st, 1975. Remember, the last name goes first. So in this case, we're going to type in Smith, John, and I'm going to put in the middle initial F just because it narrows it down a little bit, makes things a little clearer because this is such a common name. So when we hit enter, it brings back a lot of different results. So we can see that there's a lot of different information and you can tell a lot about what's happening just looking at this. So we have the name, we have the reverse party, so the other person in the transaction, the book and page, the type of document, the recording date, the street address, and the town. So let's start with book and page, because this is really fundamental to understanding how the Registry of Deeds works. So the Registry of Deeds arranges the documents in volumes, in consecutive volumes. You can really think of it as a series of books that all the deeds, mortgages, easements, everything that's ever been recorded is being recorded in a huge set of books. And so those books are numbered by volume or the book. So in this case, the top result is 11,860 and a page. So if you go to the registry and you go to the particular shelf where volume 11,860 sits, you take out that book and you flip to page 309, you're going to find this deed. What I like to do, because I want to know what's happening chronologically with a particular property, I'm going to actually search by recording date. So to sort, you just click the recording date tab and you can see that it starts with most recent. But what I really want to start with is what happened earliest. So we'll go next, and you can see that the first entry with John F. Smith is back in 1983. And you'll see here that there's no street address. If we had searched by the street address that we now have associated with this property, we wouldn't have seen this deed. So let's open up a deed and take a look at what it looks like. So to do that, we'll click the item, and then we'll hit View Image. Interestingly, you can see the other people that are involved here. So William Jolly and Gail Smith are also indexed with this particular deed. We also have some more information. We know when it was recorded. It was recorded at noon on 12/19/1983. We have the book and page here, and then we have a legal description. So we can see that it's lots 1394 to 1402. That's not super important for what we're going to look at today, but it can be helpful if you, for instance, are representing a client who's selling only a portion of their land, and you only want to get the deed that's exactly right. You might have a client that owns two houses next to each other. It's important to be able to tell what you're actually looking at with the deed. So we open up the deed and we're going to zoom in. So you can see here the elements of the deed. We have the grantor, so the person selling the property. We have the consideration, so the purchase price, and then we have the grantees, so the buyers. So in this case, John F. Smith and Gail H. Smith actually purchased lots 1394 through 1402 shown on a plan, and then I won't bore you with the description of the plan. But if you remember, we saw those plan references. You could actually type in Plan Book 2, page 564, and get an instant view of what exactly is described by these lots. But interestingly, you'll see that this isn't a street address. It's Quincy Ave, Lot 2, Marshfield, Mass. So this, you couldn't search by address and come up with this deed. So let's look at what happens in this particular chain of title. If we go to the first page, and again, we're sorted by date, so I want to scroll down to the bottom here. And the first thing that catches my eye as being interesting is that we have a deed. So we have the two parties, John Smith and Gail Smith, but they're reverse. So that tells me that title is transferring. There's something interesting going on here. So we open it up, and I always like to zoom in a little bit. Some of these older scans are a little hard to see. And you can see here, Gail H. Smith is granting her interest in the property in consideration $25,000 to John F. Smith. So she's actually selling her interest in the property. And if you remember, we looked at the lots. So there is a possibility that she only was giving some of the lots. But in this case, it was 1394 to 1402. It's the same Book 2, page 564. And interestingly, now we have an address. So this changed the address on the side, but this isn't really legally significant. This is only helpful if we're looking to see, for a quick reference to see what the address is. But importantly, if we searched by address, we wouldn't see this deed. There's no street given. And you can see that reflected right here as well. So that's why we always search by name, because sometimes you're going to find deeds that you wouldn't otherwise find if you were searching by address. So the next thing that catches my eye, there's a few homesteads, mortgage, homestead. Ooh. TKG. Let's take a look at that. So this is actually the code for what's called a taking. And so a taking, just like it sounds, is when the town takes part of your land by eminent domain. So if you're a listing agent and you're going to take a look at the property to see exactly what's outstanding, it's kind of interesting to know that there was a street taking. This tells me a couple things. This might be a public way, which is important information. That the lot lines on that plan might not be accurate. The other thing that it could tell me is that I I might not want to rely on the area on the tax card or on the plan because the street might actually encroach onto that lot. And as we all know, we have to be really careful about the disclosures that are made on MLS. And so by seeing this taking, we know that we have to be extra careful about disclosures. And it's just good information to know that in 1999, there was a street taking. Jumping ahead, the next code I see is TT. And TT actually stands for tax taking. So taking a look at the tax taking, we can actually see that this is an instrument that the town puts on the property. You can really think of it as just a lien to make sure that the real estate taxes are paid. So the taxes weren't paid on time. The town filed this lien to make sure that it was paid and that that the property owner couldn't sell the property without paying it off. But interestingly, there's actually a reference here. So we can see the book and page for what's called a certificate of redemption. And that matches what we're seeing over here, 41126, page 150. And so the reference is a really powerful tool because we can, without having to go through each individual line, we can actually see, oh, this is related to the tax taking. And so a certificate of redemption actually releases a tax taking. So if you're going on a listing appointment and you see that there's a recent tax taking, but there's no certificate of redemption, you'd be able to make the inference that person is behind on their taxes. Might be something you want to talk about when you're taking that listing to make sure that they're not in a financially distressed situation. Moving ahead, we can see that there's an affidavit. So sometimes these are interesting because they can give us more information. So this is a not me affidavit. So we're saying I'm one of the owners at 160 Quincy Ave. My social security number is redacted, so not super useful. You can also see that there's a federal tax lien that's referenced here, and they're saying that this isn't the same person. And so this can be equally as helpful as having the tax. So next we're going to look at this affidavit. So AFFT, and sometimes there's interesting information here. So this could be something about the title, but in this particular case, we're talking about the fact that this person, John F. Smith, is not one and the same as the John Smith that has a federal tax lien against them. So there's a social security number that's redacted, but we use these to make sure that it's clear that the person who owns 160 Quincy Ave isn't confused with the person that has a federal tax lien and that it's not encumbering their property. So this certificate of redemption, we already saw that. We have a declaration of homestead, but then we also have a mortgage. So we can see here that this is probably the current mortgage. I'm just going to minimize this for a second so that we can see. Okay, so there's no references here, which tells me that this is still outstanding. So I'm going to switch back here, and we know that there's a principal amount of the loan of $50,000 and that it's fairly new. It's due and payable in 2036. So I would consider this an active mortgage for purposes of your listing appointment. So this is valuable information that tells us that this is a mortgage that's going to have to be paid off at the time of sale if we're thinking about a listing appointment. And so we can work backwards from here. So we can say, what's the next most recent mortgage? So we'll open up this one, and you can see here that we have an $83,000 mortgage. This is to Rockland Federal Credit Union as well. We're just going to take a look. There's no references, so I would consider this one outstanding as well. And then the next mortgage, this one is for $50,000, and this is Rockland Federal Credit Union as well. But you can see that there's a reference, and so more than likely the mortgages before that are also going to be paid off, and so this is a discharge. So this means that the mortgage is released and we don't have to worry about paying it off. So I've really just scratched the surface at the Registry of Deeds. You can see it's a really powerful tool, and that if you're methodical, you can go through and look and see exactly what's encumbering the property, what a potential client actually owns, whether there's an issue that you can foresee and potentially start working on. So for instance, if you saw that there is something called a lis pendens, so basically saying that there's a lawsuit involving the property, if there are foreclosure notices, tax takings are important to note. This gives us some indication that the property might be in financial distress, and that could actually change the strategy or at least change the conversation at a listing appointment. I want to thank you for watching the video. I had a lot of fun making it. I know it's a little nerdy, a little geeky, but I think this topic is really important because it allows us to provide the best possible service to our clients. So rate, comment, and subscribe, and if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to us by calling or visiting our website. But until then, I look forward to talking to you.